I just bought my first Porsche. But unfortunately guys, it looks like this. Both of the airbags went off and this is definitely not good. But regardless guys, it doesn't matter because I somehow own my first ever Porsche. And because this Porsche 986 Boxster has been in an accident, I've been able to attain this car for well under market value. The question is now, will I be able to fix it? Well, I hope so. So guys, the secret is out. This is my Porsche 986 Boxster and it's got a 2.7 litre flat 6. And that's pretty crazy for a car that only weighs 1,300 kilos. But unfortunately, it is an automatic.
Brother,
But that is the least of our worries with this purchase because it's been in a pretty bad accident.
It looks good from here.
And because of the accident, it made it very hard to get off the trailer. This is a mission and a half. I'm using the handbrake and putting the car in neutral, all in the passenger seat because I can't open the door on the driver's side. What did you do? I bought a Porsche. Did you expect this?
Not at all.
We did not tell Lachlan at all.
I'm speechless. Actually speechless. This is crazy.
It's my old car.
Oh, stop it! We did unfortunately drop the Porsche in the process of getting it off the trailer, but we still managed to get it off. Now let's look at the damage.
Bro, there's no way. There's no way. Another one just drove past.
No way. That's crazy. Okay, so this is the bad and the good. We'll start off with the bad, I guess. This is where things are a little bit concerning. Looks like there's a lot of damage here, and I don't 100% know if I'm going to be able to fix this, but from the experience that we've had in the past with the other cars, we should be okay. Now, this is my biggest project yet. And yes, the damage looks bad, but honestly, anything is repairable if you put effort into it. And it almost looks like it only just needs a new guard and the suspension components and probably a radiator and a condenser. Anyway, guys, there is no point trying to fix the damage on this car if the motor is bad, because I'm sure replacing an engine is not going to be cheap. Luckily, it did come with a key, so the first thing that we're going to do is try to start it, of course. Yeah, unfortunately, no power whatsoever, so the first thing that we checked, of course, was the battery. Okay, the battery cover seems to be off for some reason, probably because they wanted to start it or something. What the hell is this, man?
It's a golf club handle.
I might have to get into golf now that I own a Porsche.
Like his car.
We then checked the battery, and as expected, it was low on charge. 1.3 volts. Battery is very dead. And while installing the new battery, we found that it had an aftermarket alarm installed. So I grabbed the battery out of the R32 Skyline because this one had a little bit more charge. Before we start it though, we need to check the oil. It's actually in the boot, which I find is very interesting. Yeah. Look at that. This is where you top the oil up. This is also where the longest dipstick in the world sits. All the checks were now complete. It now had oil and a battery with charge. Technically now the engine should start. When I put the key in, we're not going to have to worry about the airbags exploding because they've already exploded.
You know, they all have them. Yep.
Oh, bro, we got lights. Holy crap. Whoa, 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 bro.
Your alarm's trying to go off.
At this point, we were very confused because it should have been very simple. The car has been crashed here, which shouldn't stop the car from running. What's that noise?
That's your alarm siren trying to go off.
Nothing.
You're getting nothing.
Oh no.
Oh no.
To trick the immobilizer into unlocking, we even tried opening the door, closing it, locking it again, then unlocking it and going back into the car in hopes that the alarm system would turn off. But unfortunately, no luck. So Andrew has actually worked at Porsche as a mechanic for how many years?
8 years, roughly, with Porsche, and then 6 months with a few other shops here and there.
I'm pretty lucky to have you here.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I'd hope so.
Now, luckily, like I said, Andrew is an ex-Porsche mechanic, and because he's worked on a lot of these cars...
Clamshell opening? There's your convertible, bro.
He said that it's common for the convertibles to leak and cause water damage to the factory alarm system. The factory alarm system is underneath the passenger seat, underneath the carpet, so we removed it to check it out.
That's it.
Yep.
And then slide it out.
That's it.
And that's
it.
How much do you think he paid per litre on this receipt for fuel?
It looks pretty ancient, so I'm guessing like under $1.
96.7 cents a litre.
No way. That's an
That's
old
an old receipt. He got a Magnum. He got two
2000
almond Magnums.
So this guy was cruising with his convertible top, just eating magnums with his girlfriend, bro.
Go.
Moment of truth.
Here we go. It's upside down. She looks perfect. She looks perfect, bro. That right there is an alarm control module.
Now this might seem like excellent news, but what it actually means is that we haven't figured out what's wrong. And remember how we discovered that it has an aftermarket alarm? Well, that was the only other thing that could be preventing the car from running. So I contorted my body into a position that would allow me to get underneath the dash. I pulled apart the panels to get to the wiring, which was surprisingly easy considering it was a Porsche. And if you haven't had the pleasure of installing an alarm before, this would be highly intimidating. Luckily for me, I've installed many of these alarm systems before, and it was like all those moments led up to this, to figure out why this Porsche 986 Boxster was not starting, and well, I think I found the problem. When you kind of know the problem and you're about to fix it, it is the most satisfying thing, until it isn't. So this would be your ECU, and this would be your aftermarket alarm system, and this down here is your key barrel. Now from factory, there's a wire going from your key barrel to the ECU, which triggers the starter, and to install an alarm, you basically cut that wire, you wire it to the alarm, and then you wire that alarm to the ECU. So that basically puts the alarm in the middle of that wire. Now some alarm systems might have multiple wires, but in this case there was just one cut. So all I did was connect the wire to where it's supposed to go from factory, and that should hopefully fix our problem. Okay, I think we've figured it out. There was one wire that was completely chopped, which would basically immobilize the car, and the alarm would be the only thing that activates it, and we've connected those back together. So that cancels the aftermarket alarm out. All right, we're giving it power again.
Hey, you know what we didn't hear this time?
Oh yeah, we didn't hear the little siren go. I'm so nervous, man. Okay, here we go. Moment of truth. Oh my God! That was a very slow crank, but you ready?
Yep.
Oh my God! It runs! Yes! No way! Oh, yes! No way!
Started up very nicely, no smoke.
I couldn't believe it, guys, because this was such a gamble, because I had no idea if this car would even run, and the kilometers were also not even listed on the ad. So we found the kilometers after we started it, and we were quite surprised.
Alone, you got less than 110,000 Ks.
Oh my God, there we go, guys. Look at that. Oh, let me show them. 109,000 kilometers. That is very low. That is so sick, man. It feels so weird driving a convertible though. I can't believe we just drove the Porsche in the garage in the state that it's in. I don't know how the dolly's holding up, but we're now going to start taking off all the panels in order to access all the damaged bits and try to see what we need in order to fix this thing. I'm going to get this thing on the jack stands, and hopefully working on a Porsche is as easy as some people say. Getting the car on jack stands was a bit tricky as the car from factory is very low, but because there was nothing in the way of the subframe, I was able to place the jack there, which made things quite a bit easier. Alright, we finally have the car on jack stands, and as you can see, this wheel is not connected by anything other than the strut. Anyway, we're going to take off this wheel so we can assess the damage and then obviously just work our way back to removing this panel, which is completely cooked. Now the wheel came off with no problems surprisingly, but man, it would have been a hard hit to get it looking like this. Oh my God. What the hell? I don't think I've ever seen a wheel like this. This is bad. The control arm at the bottom has been snapped. There are actually two control arms. There's another one just down there, and that's also snapped, of course. The strut actually looks okay. The brake caliper looks good too. The hub assembly looks okay as well, and the rotor turns as well, which means that there's really not that much to replace. Honestly guys, I think we lucked out because like I've been saying, it doesn't actually look that bad. Anyway, to get a better look, I began removing the fender, which was interesting as for the first time I had to use Torx bits. There were a few bolts on the top holding it on the frame rail of the car, then a sneaky bolt underneath the fuel cap, and the rest were under the fender liner. The fender liner was especially hard to get off. This is because of the accident as there was a bit of bent metal holding it in place, so I had to use a hammer, and with a bit of persuasion, it eventually budged. Oh my God. There we go. And then I finally got access to the nuts and bolts underneath. I then removed the factory charcoal canister, which was super easy to remove, and there was a few more bolts holding it in place, and finally, the fender was almost off. Hell yeah. Look at that. Oh my goodness. Look at this monstrosity, man. This is hectic, but it's all off, and we need to take this off as well. This is the frame rail, and there is absolutely no kinks. This is the only kink right there, which, you know, isn't sort of changing the structural integrity of it. There's a few bent brackets like this one here, which will be able to, you know, bend back. It's not really stiff of a metal. Look, I can bend that with my hand. The coolant lines look pretty good as well. That one doesn't look like it's cracked or anything, and it still feels malleable. And there's one on the bottom, I believe. Yep, and that's still intact. The AC lines as well look mint. Looks like the only thing we'll need to do is unbolt them and then bolt them back to the new condenser. And if you're curious to what is going on here, this is basically the AC and the radiator. Just like how it would be in a normal car, but it's much smaller because there is much more coolant going through this motor as it needs to go all the way to the back. So the cooling efficiency, you don't really need a big radiator. So there's only one thing that I'm concerned about, and that is this hose, which has been impacted by the wheel. As you can see, it's pretty flat, so we'll need to bend that back into shape. And then some of the seam still has cracked because of the collision, which is not too bad, but this down here is a little bit bent. The radiator and condenser setup on the Porsche was very hard to visualize. I guess because it has to sit in such a small spot at the front of the car, it has to be complicated, but it didn't matter anyway because it was all going in the bin. Looks like we are going to need a lot of parts. I'm a little bit worried on how I'm going to source all this, but future problem. Anyway, I'm going to start removing this bumper. Doesn't look too complicated. Looks like I need to take this plastic trim off. I've actually watched a YouTube video and it doesn't look that hard. I've heard this so many times before, and from Andrew, the Porsche mechanic. Porsches are very easy to work on. And this is very surprising because most European cars like BMWs and Mercedes, they seem very complicated, whereas the Porsche just makes sense. It did not take much time at all to get this bumper off. It was very easy to do, and there seems to be a YouTube tutorial for everything on these cars. That literally took like 5 minutes, and yes, I know that half the bumper is missing, but still, that is very surprising. That is, I like working on Porsches. Now this thing is looking rough, real rough. There's a few suspension components that we need to now disconnect from the subframe, because I don't think I showed you guys this before on how bad this collision actually was. But check that out. That is the front lower control arm. Now, one way we're able to tell if anything is bent is, of course, if this bolt is bent, and the bolt goes straight back in, which means that everything is straight. There would have been a lot of force for this to happen. Look at the ball joint, completely out of the steering rack. And just like that, there is our steering rack in a thingamajigger. That was one of my biggest concerns before I bought the car, if the steering rack was okay, because they're quite expensive and they are not easy to get to. Anyway, I'm just going to start taking everything apart so you can see everything that's broken. The hardest part about repairing a car that's been in an accident are all the small little bits that are hidden. So we're just taking our time to sort of take everything apart and just process where everything goes. And we also found this, which is a little bit concerning. Now, there is some more damage in the car, which doesn't really make sense, and I don't think it was caused by the accident. And I'll show you what I mean. So there is damage just here on the door and quarter panel. And as you can see, like, it doesn't look like the door has actually hit the quarter panel, because if the door had hit the panel, then this would sort of be damaged right there. But that is not the case. The impact did not affect the door at all. Even the hinges are straight. Nothing is bent on the door side. But for some reason the door doesn't fit correctly. Initially this scared the hell out of me because I thought the car was bananaed, but after some further investigation, I think that's not the case. I think what's happened is it was broken into, or someone tried to break into the car, because it looks like someone sort of like tried to pry down and pull the door. And obviously that would never have worked, because when this is locked, it's not going to pry the door away. But yeah, there's like no marks here where the door would have hit the quarter panel there. So this kind of sucks. These are the things that you have to be careful of when you're buying a car from the auctions, because you just don't know what you're going to find when you actually see the car. Like I said, we took a risk, and unfortunately this is what we have to deal with. Luckily doors aren't too expensive, and this one could be savable. It's just going to cost a bit of money to obviously get it painted and repaired. Before we start sourcing new parts, I just want to quickly try and fix this pipe, because I don't want to have to replace this, as this pipe stops about here and then goes all the way to the AC compressor. Now, because we're trying to save as much money as possible on this build so we can have a running and driving on the street Porsche for as cheap as possible, we are trying to save every part. And if I can bend this AC line into shape without having to buy a new one, it's going to save us a lot of money. But after some quick searching on Facebook and eBay, it turns out these Porsche parts aren't actually that expensive. Initially, for half these parts on the Porsche, I thought it was going to be crazy expensive because it's a Porsche, and you think that everything Porsche related is expensive, but no, I've actually been surfing the web, found all these parts on eBay. And of course, Facebook Marketplace, there are some people actually wrecking these cars, so parts are plentiful. I am very confident we're going to be able to get this Porsche 996 Boxster on the road, running and driving for well under market value. So I'm going to check out eBay and Facebook to try and get some parts, and when I source them, part number 2 will be up. So subscribe for part 2, and I'll see you in the next one. See you guys. Oh, stop it!